Warmly welcome everyone again to this event. Today's event, organized by MSCP, aims to answer some of the burning questions by early career psychologists and give a brief overview of questions such as what next after graduation, what to expect in the job market, and so on. So hopefully this information will be helpful towards all individuals here. So we would like to welcome our panel of speakers for today. Firstly, we have Dr. Joel Loh, MSCP President, Director of the Mind Psychology Services and Training. Next, we have Ms. Shabira Inani, Clinic Coordinator from Clinic Psychology Kesihatan UKM. And lastly, we would like to welcome Dr. Darlina Hani, Senior Lecturer from IMU University. All right. Okay. So now let's move on to the first question. All right. Our first question is, I've graduated, what next? Let's invite the panelists to answer this.
3-month vacation. That's always a good place to start. I'll go first since I opened my big mouth, right? I think rest is actually, I mean, I joke about it, but I think it is quite important, right? I think of all the postgraduate degrees that you could do, a master's in clinical psychology is pretty darn exhausting. Because it not only stresses you academically, but also in terms of your psychological, emotional health as well, isn't it, right? Because they force you to do so many things, right? And because you're engaging with clients on such a regular basis as well, I think it's something that can take a lot out of you, right? And for those of you guys who just graduated, I'm sure you know this feeling as well, right? Once you're doing your thesis, you're doing your internship, you're trying to finish up your hours, you're trying to do all your logbooks and things like that. Once you're done and you actually stop and you think about all the work you've done in the past 2 years, it's insane. It's absolutely crazy, right? So I honestly think that taking time off and resting for a while just to find yourself again amidst all the crazy is actually really important, because if not, I think burnout is definitely a big problem, a real problem as well that you can go through, right? So take some time off, recharge your batteries, take care of yourself, go be crazy, go party, be a kid again, right? Because for the past 2 years you had to be a professional adult for the whole time you're doing your training. So be a kid, enjoy yourself, have fun, and then after that the hard work starts again when you start looking for work and things like that,
Thank you, Dr. Joel. Would any other panelists like to answer this?
Wow, Dr. Joel, straight away, I just rest and that's it. You stop there.
Pass it around.
Okay, all right. So the question is, after finishing masters, right, Ping?
After graduated, what's next on the line?
Okay, so I guess there's a couple of options. Of course, what Dr. Joel said just now is true. Have a break. You deserve the break. I'm sure your supervisors and your lecturers all pushed you like crazy for the past 2 years. So you don't have to listen to them anymore for a bit. And you can get some rest. But after that, looking into job options in general, I guess there is, of course, going into practice. Right? I mean, you want to practice. That's why you did a master's in a sort of a practitioner's course. So for that, you have several options. You join you become an associate at a center or psychological center. You can join an NGO. Okay. Or you can try join the government sector, which I will leave to Shabira to probably talk more about that. Okay. Yeah. Or another one, well, what I did, I guess, if I could share, what I did was I did a little bit of everything. So I did sort of part-time practicing, or rather associate, and also some part-time teaching as well. So that's another option. Okay. And also, I guess, corporate sectors. I know nowadays there are quite a few corporate companies that are looking for psychologists, specifically clinical psychologists as well. So those are some options. Yeah. Thanks.
Yep. True. So I think Dr. Joel and Dr. Darlina has summarized my points as well. Like, the importance of having break. because it's really draining to be a master in clinical psychology, and to work as well, the commitment and all. It's good to have a break, right? And in terms of options, Dr. Dalina has laid out a few options that we have, and perhaps additional one, in addition to serving in Malaysia, actually in Singapore, there is a high demand for clinical psychologists and our Malaysian graduate clinical psychologists. So perhaps if it's something that you want to venture, it's also okay. In terms of government setting, okay, so after graduated, I think it's important for you to plan ahead what kind of work setting that you like to go, okay, what kind of nature and clientele that you want to go. So if you are, I mean, for government, right? Of course, there will be a lot of exposure, but there will also be issue of like over workload, okay? And if it's in KKM, you have to be ready to be posted anywhere in Malaysia. And even though, I mean, not to scare you, but it's a reality, right? And even though when you get promoted, you can't stay at the same hospital. And because in KKM setting, we don't have much clinical psychology, so perhaps one in Malacca, one in Pahang. So when you're promoted, if you're okay, if you're flexible to move around, then it's okay. But another option for government as well is like me, I'm in UKM, right? So it's in university. So apart from being a clinical psychologist there, I also helping in terms of teaching, okay, supervision of clients, and because I'm a clinic coordinator, so managing the clinic admin, basically. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shabira. Dr. Jallo, would you like to add a bit about private centers and EAP projects?
Well, I think like what Dalina and Shabira said, right? So I think there are a lot of options available, but I think like what they both mentioned, which is really important, it's to find something that you want to try and see, right? Because I think every setting has its own challenges. Like Shabira mentioned, working for the government means work, like you really work, right? So I think if you want to go to some place where you want to expand your field of knowledge and experience, then that's the best place to go to, right? Especially when you're like the only clin site in the entire state, for example. I suspect a lot of us would end up in private practices within the Klang Valley or Penang in most cases. JB is picking up as well. I think last I heard, JB has quite a few number of private centers nowadays, so that's another good place to go to and see, right? And I think in private practice, the main thing that you need to remember is the focus here is being flexible, right? I think very rarely do you have practitioners who have one private center and you don't go anywhere else. I think the name of the game is mobility, right? Like when I first started out, for example, I was in 3 different centers in the hospital. So it's just something that you have to learn how to manage your workload and you manage your expectations like, in terms of the work you're doing quite a bit, right? Like what Delina said as well, nowadays EAP programs, employee assistance programs, are getting really popular. And there are 2 iterations to this. Delina mentioned the one where the companies themselves want to hire the clin sites, which is happening. And these usually are the MNCs, the bigger corporations and things like that. So they have a on-site, like let's say, I don't know what you call it, EAP/wellness program kind of thing department. So then they hire people there. But the more common one in Malaysia are still outsourced EAP programs, meaning to say that they will outsource to a particular company, for example. Then anytime the staff wants to see a therapist, for example, then they give the center a call and then they will pass it on to the therapist there, right? When it's the latter, it's really not that different from the normal therapy sessions in a private setting. So you get clients come in, you see them, you help them go through their issues, and then off you go again in that sense. So the only difference, I think, is the scope of clients that you see, right? Typically in AP programs, you see a bit more a narrow field. So it's more like your day-to-day stresses, like your depression, anxiety, stress, sleep, that kind of thing, right? Compared to, let's say, a hospital setting where it's a lot more wider, a lot more diverse, a lot more quote-unquote exciting as well, because you see the things that you learn about in your classes, which you only hear about it now and then, for example. So it really depends on what you're intending to do, what you're hoping to do in the future, and who you're hoping to see in the future as well.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Joel. Would any of the panelists like to add to this question? Okay. So let's move on to the second question, which is what to expect in a job description as a full-time CP. So I would like to invite the panelists sort of share based on your experiences.
Full-time CP job description.
Yeah. So sort of like day to day, what would you be doing?
Okay. Yeah, ladies first.
Okay, I'll go first. But okay, so this is what to expect in a job description as a full-time CP. Okay, bear in mind because I am in a academic setting as well. Okay, and I'm serving a teaching clinic. So apart from serving clients in terms of assessment and intervention for clients referred from hospitals around the Klang Valley, I also supervise the master clinical psychology trainees. So we do have our internal trainees, which is from UKM, and sometimes we also take the external students, so from other uni, right? They do the practicum in our clinic. I'm also involved with teaching in terms of tool demonstration, okay, assisting lecturer in the materials of learning, and in terms of academic, what to say, the curriculum review. So, you know, like every program, we have a curriculum, right? So actually, we are working on that also, you know, to review it, to improvise it and such. So, yeah, perhaps other panel could give a gist on what a CP they look like. But in my setting, being a clinical psychologist in university, it really varies. I think my job scopes covers different things. And as well, because UCAM is a research university, we are also attached in the research center, okay, where we are involved in the research project, community service, and activities related. So, for example, I am under HCare. HCare, UCAM is the research center for elderly wellness. So we have a multidisciplinary team, okay, to focus on elderly wellness. So there is a physiology, physiotherapy, diet, speech, okay, and psychology. So, and then we are attached to PAWE, which is the elderly society, right? So where we would collect data for research, and then sometimes with the cognitive screening for them, well-being screening, things like that lah. So it is interrelated, and it is something that I cherish to do. But I would say the aspects, it cover different aspects lah.
Thank you, Ms. Shabira. Would Dr. Dalina like to share?
Well, this is a bit difficult to answer because I don't, how do I say, I'm not a full-time practitioner, put it that way, right? So I'm a full-time lecturer and I practice out of private centers on weekends. So Mondays to Fridays, it's, you know, I have a lot of my students here. So they see me all day, every day. Well, not all day, not all day, but every day almost. So, you know, classes and clinical supervision while they're doing their internal practicum, and of course meetings, administration stuff, you know, and all those fun academia things, research as well. Okay. And then on Saturdays, that's when I assign my Saturdays to meeting my clients from the centers that I work at. Yeah, basically. So anyway, for in academia, so at least where I'm from, which is IMU, we also have a clinic there, sort of a healthcare clinic, and there is that option also for us as lecturers, as clinical psychologists, to also practice out of that IMU clinic, basically. So you can select certain days of the week, certain days and certain hours of the week where you can attach yourself and meet clients there as well. So with academia, that's what I like. I guess the fact that not only do I get to teach, but I still get to practice at the same time as well. So similar to Shabira, right? It's yes, you practice, but you also get your hands, you know, involved in the teaching and training of future CPs as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So for a center like the mine, for example, right? How do I put this? There really is not very. There's not very clear defined things that you do, because you technically do a bit of everything, right? And what I mean by that is because, okay, let me backtrack a little bit. I think one of the most surprising things that I've learned over the years as a role as a private practicing clinical psychologist, right, is that a lot of the work that I do is based on education, and I don't mean teaching students like you guys, for example, and things like that. No, but I mean education is in terms of a more public-facing kind of education, right? Because a lot of people think they know what mental health is, think they know what therapy is, and things like and the like, right? Half the emails I respond to, half the calls I respond to are people who call up and say, "Hey, I think I need a therapist, but I'm not sure whether I need to or not," right? And I think because of that, right, because I am fielding so many of these unknown questions, people who don't know what they're coming in for, what therapy is about, and things like that, that also means the kind of requests that we get also is very wild and wonderful and crazy and things like that, right? So of course you've got the regular clinical work, right? So people who have depression, anxiety, whatever, they come in and see you and you see them, right? So that's one. Another thing that we get a lot of requests for is workshops and training programs, and that's something that we do quite a bit of. So we either go to the client side or we do a webinar like this, for example. Thank you, COVID. That was a very popular modality and still is today, which is wonderful, right? So that's the second one. I think the third one that we do a lot of is nowadays is those kind of road shows and mental health screening programs, which is a really great way to engage the community as well. Because sometimes, so my dad likes to say, like, if you can't bring the sage to the, if you can't bring the sage to you, you go to the sage, like, basically, like, on the mountain, right? So when people have these kind of questions, they might be afraid to ask, they might be a bit shy and things like that. So these kind of road shows are wonderful because you're right there in front of them. They can't run away, right? So then you can engage with them, answer questions and things like that, right? Nowadays, we have with the different kind of modalities of practice that we have available as well. As a private practitioner, you will also be doing different kind of doing therapy in different kind of modalities as well. So the traditional one is face to face, right? One-on-one in the clinical room, or on a screen like this. But you also now have chat-based therapies, which, like, people like Naduri, Thoughtful Intellect, for example, and things that I do a lot of. This one can be synchronous or asynchronous. Right? Synchronous meaning to say that your client is live chatting with you, like when you're talking to your boyfriend, girlfriend, beanie girl, anything like that. But it also can be asynchronous, so it's almost like sending emails to one another, and this can happen throughout the span of a day. So that's another very popular one. And I think the other quite unique one that we've been engaged with quite a bit nowadays also is this kind of corporate programs where you're working together with other partners, right? So that means clinical work is just one part of it, right? It's not the main thing, right? So that means, for example, if you go to a leadership program, there might be people who do the coaching part, the IO part, and things like that, and you're there just working on the mentality part of things, right? So learning how to be flexible and working within these kind of teams is also a part of the work that we do in that sense, right? Now, why have I listed so many things? Because I think that's the reality of the situation, right? Because CleanSight is such a new-ish field. I mean, the ACTA only got passed in 3-4 years ago, for example, right? Or maybe more than that. Means that for this many years, the definition of CleanSight has never been defined, right? So that means we have a lot of opportunities to do a lot of different things. But on top of that, also because psychology as a field is so young, like the only two majorly established psychology roles is what counseling, CleanSight for now, right? There's neuropsych, there's social psych, there's cog psych, there's so many other psychology fields which don't have representation. And unfortunately, because of that, then we get pulled in as well, right? So I think, like I said just now, mobility is one thing, flexibility is another thing, right? Which you have to be, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on where you look at it, right? So yeah, being a private practitioner in the Klang Valley in Malaysia means getting prepared for anything and everything. You just don't know what you're gonna land in your lab, and the question is, are you up for it or not? Are you gonna do it or not?
Thank you, Dr. Joel. So I hear from all the panels that actually being flexible is really a key factor here. And there are a lot of choices, whether or not you're in the academia, you're in the private practice, and so on. So we would now like to move on to question number 3. How to prepare yourself for interviews or your career, and how to successfully market yourself to your employer. So would Dr. Darlina like to start on this?
Sorry, it brought me back to when I first started looking for work. It just brought back some nervous memories, I guess. But I guess it's no different than any other job interview that anybody would go for. I suspect most of in fact, all of the graduates from a MCP program would have had to undergo an interview before joining that program, right? So there's similarities there, I guess. Number one, be very clear about what you want to do, right? Number two, be very clear about the employer that you're interviewing with, right? So make sure you're well informed about what it is that they do, what the job scope is. When they advertise, they would have that information, but at the same time, also have your own questions, or clarify if any of those job descriptions don't, you're not clear about them. So very important to clarify and know what you're getting yourself into. I think it helps if you have, this is from my personal experience, I guess. It would be helpful if you actually have had an informal chat with somebody from that institution or company or center, whatever it is. Just because MCP is such a small field, everybody almost knows everybody. So it's not that difficult to actually establish some kind of connections with that particular place that you're interviewing with, right? And it's not, don't get me wrong, it's not about, you're trying to keep us earlier or things like that. It's about understanding the culture and understanding the people there and knowing before, because nowadays you can get all the information, a lot of information beforehand, right? So just finding out more about that particular place and seeing if it actually aligns with your values, okay, with your goals, with the type of people that you want to work with. I think that's very important. So, the reputation of the people there, it's useful for you to know how they are and things like that. So we can't deny that there are, stories of, unsavory or some things that you like, or maybe a bit unethical or things like that. Then if that doesn't align with your values, then and maybe it's maybe you want to clarify, make sure that what you're hearing is accurate. But or also maybe avoid such employers in that sense. Yeah, okay. That's just my part. I'm sure Shabira and Joel has other ideas as well.
Thank you, Dr. Shabira. So I'm hearing like a lot doing like your own research and also really like understanding the company, making some connections to get a fuller picture of what you might be doing. So I would like to ask Ms. Shabira, being in the government sector, probably application is slightly different. And would you like to share more on that?
First of all, I think I really agree with Dr. Dalina points on, getting to know first the setting that you're going on in. So in terms of the environment, okay, in terms of the setting, and the clientele population that you're going to apply. So is it something that you want to do? Okay. So because once you are working, it's important for us. For me, it's important for us to enjoy that process. So first of all, we do need to know what kind of setting and clientele and environment that we want to work into. Okay. In terms of for our government, right? The application process will open occasionally and it is randomized. So it depends on the availability. Okay, if there is someone leaving or if we got the what we call vote opposition, from the budget usually, if we got the vote to have to add another member that will be open. So if you are keen to work in a KKN or university settings, you shall look for the website, okay, if there is an alert or on the applications, because I really can't tell when the vacancy is open. And of course, like I said just now, to understand what we're going into, so that to know whether we want it. Because if we want it, if we find that it aligns with us, I think there might not be issue when we attending the interview. You know, whatever being asked or whatever that is going on, it is fine. But if it's something not meant for you or it's something you don't like, then it will be difficult for you. And even though if you get the job, perhaps it might not be um, a a long one lah. Perhaps you might not enjoy it and all. Yeah. Um,
Thank you, Ms. Shabira. So it's again like this, like Dr. Dalina saying, doing your own research. It's just that with KKM, it's a bit of a luck issue whether or not the opening is there. Let's direct this now to Dr. Joel.
So I think Dr. Dila and Shabira have mentioned all the formal things we need to look out for, which I think is really critical, right? Especially knowing your center. I think the place that you're going to be practicing in and what you do is really important, right? I think one of the pet peeves that we have is that when people come in and they say, "Oh, I want to do X, Y, Z, ABC," and you're thinking to yourself, "I don't do any of that sort. Like, what are you doing here?" That kind of thing. So it shows how prepared you are and how ready you are for the role. So I think that's really important. I think just to build on what both of them have said already, I think clinical competency is actually quite important because I think, especially in private practice, it tends to be quite a lonely profession. I think because although we have a team, for example, at the mind, for example, the therapists will come as and when they've got clients. So when they don't have, then you're seeing them on your own, basically, right? So as an employer, I need to know that you are clinically competent enough to hold your own, right? Of course, if you have a difficult case or whatever it is, then you can reach out for supervision or that, not an issue. But on a day-to-day basis, day-to-day clients, we need to be able to be confident enough that you can carry your own weight, you know what you're doing, and you're going to be okay, right? Younger practitioners, of course, you need to hold your hands a little bit, but that's fine, that's normal. But by and large, you should be able to get by on your own, so that's important. But I think for me personally, one of the most critical parts about this is you, right? I think a lot of times when people come for interviews, they try and put their best foot forward. They try and be a certain way, act a certain way, speak a certain way, and I don't get to see enough of you, which is problematic for me because if you think about it, our entire profession is based on your ability to connect with people, right? So if you come in as this perfect robot and I cannot see you as you who you are as a person, I find it very hard to hire people like that because then who am I hiring? What am I hiring? It's an unknown quantity, right? Once we get out of the interview process, it's going to be like a random draw, right? Because I don't know who am I going to be getting in that sense, right? So a lot of times the people that do get into the team are people who are authentic, who really want to just connect with you and just want to have conversation with you and things like that. I find that so incredibly important because that's who the clients are going to get. That's who the clients are going to see, right? And that helps me gauge so much better, right? Now, I've also gotten questions before about things, how much we look at grades and your transcripts and all that. Honestly speaking, for me, I just need to know that you got your masters. That's it. And if you're MSCP, HP member, great, better. But that's all I need your grades for. Whether you're the worst student or best student really doesn't matter to me as much as can you connect with someone? Are you able to connect with another human being? That is the most important thing I look out for when I want to interview people and want to hire people, right? Because at the end of the day, I can teach you CBT, I can teach you ACT, I can teach you SBT, whatever. I can teach you all those things, not an issue. I cannot teach you how to connect with people. I cannot teach you how to be a human, right? So that's what I look out for. And for all of you guys here who go for interviews, and I'm sure a lot of you guys will be going, try and be as authentic as you can. And because like what Shabira said as well, not only may the setting not be right for you, the people that you're going there might not be right for you as well. You know how we tell all our students this, right? Sometimes when you see your clients, rapport is really important. Like sometimes it's a good rapport, bad rapport. Sometimes you want to love them, sometimes you want to smack them on the head, right? Same goes as well. When you go for an interview, while the employer is evaluating you, you also evaluating the employees as well, isn't it? Right? So if you go in the room and then you think that, okay, I cannot work with this person, then okay, great, don't work with this person, right? There are many places to try and see, right? And the only way you can truly gauge that is to be as authentic and as real as possible, because that's who you're going to be for the rest of your time there.
I think Dr. Joel brought up a really good point of being authentic in the interviewing process. Dr. Joel, do you have a tip on how to be authentic in the interviewing process?
How? I have no idea. I think go in there don't try and impress. I think that's the key thing here. I think when you try and impress, immediately your thoughts are going to be filled with, okay, I need to be a certain way, do a certain thing, make sure I know my theories well, and that, which is important, don't get me wrong. But I think when that becomes the be all and end all of the entire interview process, it becomes very restrictive, right? Rather go into the interview process thinking, hey, I want to get to know these people and I want them to see who I am as well, right? I think when your intentions are that way inclined, so that means I want to get to know these people versus I want to get the job, right? It changes the way you react to people, relate with people, right? Same goes with therapy as well, right? When we see a client and say, okay, I want to maintain this client because I need to get paid, right? Versus I want to work with this client because I want to help them and see what I can do to get them back on their feet, your approach is going to be very different, right? So I think going into the interview with the right intentions. Don't try and impress your employers, no, because you're a client a junior client side, we know what we're getting, right? Someone who knows their stuff but needs some work, right? Great, not an issue. But go into the interview process wanting to get to know these people, wanting to show who you are, showcase who you are. And I think that allows as much as possible the authentic self of yourself to show.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Joe. And the next question, I would like to direct it to you first as well. How to decide on job offers? Sorry, we can't hear you, Dr. Joe.
Sorry, just mouthing your question. Sorry. From prior practice, it's quite easy. Just say yes to everything. Because like I said, you're not gonna, very rarely are you able to spend like 8 hours a day in one center, right? That's the reality of the situation, is that there's so many centers out there, so many different localities, so many people's populations you're gonna serve, that only one center very rarely is able to satisfy those needs, basically, right? So as much as you can, try and attach yourself to different places, different settings and things like that. So if you get opportunity to say yes, just say yes, right? And try it out and see, right? Just make sure to check in with your employers and see whether they're okay with that. No, a lot of private practices in KL are quite okay with that because that's the name of the game. But there are also some that are a bit more careful about that process, right? So you just check in with them and see what their preferences are, or whether they have any SOPs in place and all that.
Would there actually be certain factors that we might want to look out for, like supervision opportunities, salary range, and things like that?
So from a private practice perspective, I could be mistaken, but there are not very many places that actually offer a monthly salary, a fixed salary for clinical psychologists, right? Unless you're working in a private hospital or a NGO or something like that, then yes. But for a private center like the mine, for example, by and large, we pay per client. So that means you come in, you see 10 clients per week, then we'll pay you 10 clients worth of money in that sense, right? So in terms of salary, there isn't really a fixed salary in mind. It's like the more you work, the more money you get, kind of thing. That's one. Supervision wise, I think most centers are run by senior-ish people, so you will have some support there in that sense, right? But in most cases, we can also find people who we are comfortable being supervised, either because of modality or because of personality, for example. That might be a more reliable way. Of course, if your center provides it, all the better, right? But I don't think there needs to be a deciding factor, so to speak, right? You can get supervision outside as well, right? I think for me, when I was looking for work way back many moons ago, my interest was more about in terms of how I can learn, right? Whether from the practitioners or from the setting, right? Like what they were doing, for example. So those were my main motivators when I was looking for jobs.
Thank you, Dr. Joel. What about Dr. Darlena? How do you think we should decide on job offers?
That one only you can answer lah. Only the person can answer. I don't know, right? You want the money or you want the prestige? If there's prestige attached to it, there's the name of the center, who's in that center, you want to be attached to that person. That's really your own prerogative lah. What you are looking for your own career development. I just wanted to expand a bit more on what Joel said in terms of full-time associate kind of thing. So there are centers that actually offer full-time placements, right? So you get a flat rate pay regardless how many clients you see. Okay, so there are centers that do that. So then you get to see many clients lah. Okay, which at the end of the day, in terms of hourly rate, might be lesser than had you gone with an hourly rate, if that makes sense, right? But again, right, what's your motivation at this early part of your career? Got to be practical about it. Of course, practicalities to some people is about, the highest pay, fair, of course. Also, there might be some that are looking at maybe long-term plans. They want to set up their own center. So, they want to gain as much experience as possible now. So your goal is about finding a place that can give you the most number of cases that you can, most number of clients that you can work with, and things like that. So again, there is a variety of options, so full-time, part-time, associate, and things like that. So it goes back to what's your goal in this first couple of years upon graduation, right? Having said that, because I'm from university, I'm going to still just give my spiel and say that's another option. You can always, this is hard sell. You can always join university, maybe not as a full-time, because I know some people, you want to become a practitioner, what should you teach, kind of thing. But there's always part-time options, people. Okay, don't close your doors and anything. Don't be like me, because when I started out also, it was all like, oh no, why teach? I want to practice. Come on, I'm a CP. I should practice. I should see clients. But there's a lot of meaning, and there's a lot of satisfaction. There's a lot of, you feel good about training sort of the next generation of CPs. That there's a whole level of what's the word? Meaning or something like. I can. It's there.
Legacy.
It's there. It's not coming
Legacy.
up. Yeah. Legacy, right? You wanna impart knowledge, and you might be thinking, hey, I just graduated. What can I actually do? You can do a lot. You're at least 2 years more experience than the students. So there's quite a lot that you can actually do. In fact, you're probably more connected to them compared to us older ones. Okay, in that sense, so you would understand the challenge way more, because during our time, the older ones, the challenges were way different than what you guys are facing right now. So there's value in teaching too. Okay, all right, that's my spiel for today. All right, Shabira.
You, like Dr. Darlena, for the hard sell, yes, academia, everyone. It's definitely one of the options that you can think of. What about Miss Shabira? Well, how do you think we should decide?
Yeah, I think it's true. Like Dr. Darlena said, okay, there is satisfaction meeting clients, but if you can have both world of satisfaction, meeting clients, okay, serving clients, and also producing our future good clean site that would serve the community, then it is awesome. So I don't know, like when Dr. Dalina said, right, if you guys can see, she's smiling all around. I think she really mean it, because it is true. Satisfaction in a job, it cannot be bought by money. Why money? Because obviously I'm in government setting, so perhaps I might be in the lower range of pay, right? But it depends on my purpose. Okay, so I think my life purpose is to contribute to community as much as I can. So like, having both work, okay, it's something that I like. So in terms of that, just now Dr. Darina mentioned about teaching. So actually, for if you're interested in government setting, right, we also have this offer, okay, to continue your study, okay. Now we are on, when we graduate, we are master student, master graduate. So for government, we have this called hadiah. I can't remember. It's hadiah latihan pelajaran, something like that. So we can get a cuti belajar, sponsored study. But of course, there are some rules and regulations that we need to follow. So for example, for me, I need to wait 5 years after pengesahan. So now, because government is also dragging it, so from the start of my service and until the pengesahan is already 5 years lah. So to wait more is actually 10 years after your service. But actually a lot of people doing this. So they already got the job stability. With the government, we have pension, we have the benefits, right? And then they wait for that PhD opportunity, they get sponsored, they get the study leave. right? Things like that. Um, yeah, I think that's all from me. Yeah, thank you,
Miss
Mr.
Shabira.
Sivaganesh. You mentioned hadiah latihan persekutuan. HLP.
All right. So for those who don't know, it's in the chat. Uh, the program that Ms. Shabira has mentioned. So what I'm hearing for all three panelists is really about knowing what you want and going for that setting that can offer you what you would like in terms of your career growth, right? So we're now going to move on to the Q&A session. For our participants, if you have questions that you have not submitted to us, feel free to leave it in the chat. We will move on to the questions that we have gathered for now. So first question is, what are the biggest challenges you face in your work sector? And I would like to start off with Dr. Joel first.
So I think time is a factor as well, right? So I've been practicing for what 12 years or so, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Serena, correct me if I'm wrong. I could be saliming here. And I think the issues that I face now as a more senior clinician and also as a business owner is a bit different from when I first started, right? I think when I first started, the name of the game was like to get as many clients as I could, to build my hours, my experiences, and things like that, right? And also to a certain extent, trying to catch up with the rest of my friends as well. I don't know about you guys, but as I was slogging away doing my degree and then my master's and then my training after that, all my friends were getting jobs, getting promotion, buying cars, buying house. And then they all say, hey, I'm getting married. What am I doing? Finishing my thesis. So I think the early years was also a lot of catching up with life as well, because you finally graduated, you're working, you're earning some money, dating, whatever it is, right? So I think back then the challenge was about just surviving, I think, right? So not just in terms of financial means, but life experience, clinical experience and things like that, right? So those were the early challenges back then. Nowadays it's different. I think nowadays it's more about, I think, like what both Shabir and Dalina said, right? It's about training, it's about supervision, and that's what I do. Most of my time is dedicated to that nowadays. And like both of them say, like it is very fulfilling, right? To be able to share what you know, what little you know, to help bring up the next generation is a fantastic and wonderful experience. And I think if you guys have the opportunity to do so at some point, please go ahead and do so. I'm sure all of you benefited from good supervisors, so be the same good supervisor to the young next generation in that sense, right? So that's my challenges right nowadays, making sure that my practitioners, my kids, I call them my kids because they're all my kids, don't go cray and do something absolutely insane, right? So making sure that they're okay, taken care of, but also like a parent knowing that sometimes I just need to let go and let them take some risks and do things on their own, right? And this, my job is to catch them rather than tell them what to do all the time in that sense. And that's my challenge nowadays, right? Being able to not only take care of my own clinical practice, but the clinical practice of other people as well. And then the other part is also managing the company, right? People close to me will always hear me say this, right? My job is to keep the lights on, to make the coffee, to clean the floors, make sure the center doesn't, go up in flames. That's my job. For me, clinical work is my me time, my relaxation time. That's my enjoyment. You know what I mean? I find so much passion in that, so I don't see it as work. So for me, that's my challenge. I'm making sure that my team is taken care of. The perut nasi doesn't go away. They've got jobs to do. I can take care of them. That's my challenge nowadays.
Thank you, Dr. Joel. So, Dr. Darlena, what are your work challenges?
Shabira, you want to go first?
Okay, I can go first. So I think my biggest challenge in my setting might be lack of human resource and overloaded of cases. Because in clinic psychology kesihatan UKM, we receive a lot of cases from Klang Valley and also state related like Pahang and all. Because perhaps if you're in Bentong, then it's nearer for you to come to UKM rather to go to hospital in Pahang, and as well KKM might need longer time, right? So here in our clinic, we only have 2 clinicians, okay, me and Shasha. So there will be an abundance of cases. In some cases, they will say, this is urgent, and we can't find any time slot for that as well, right? So to manage that to manage that. So for now, our waiting list, okay, if anyone referred to us is 6 to 8 months, but for urgent cases, we will try to manage it faster. And also challenge of being a multitasker, right? Not only clinician, but a manager, a clinic manager, the supervisor, the academic things related, okay, and community service and all. But I think I'm rolling with it lah. Rolling with it, okay. Just put up the work calendar, just live in the present moment, and then move on to the next. Yeah, but that is why our purpose is very important. Because if we think that this is aligned with our values, this pay us so much satisfaction, then we are able to move on despite any challenges that we face. Yeah.
Thank you, Shabira. I feel like that's a good problem to have, that you have so many clients, not enough time to see them. That's a good problem to have, right? So got to start lobbying UKM to get in more CPs. So I guess in the university setting, I'm guessing that it's quite similar across the board. So I think all universities that are offering MCP at the moment, the biggest challenge is the lack of resources. Hence me hard selling and asking all of you to come into academia. Okay, so it's like we have big plans, we have big dreams, we are super passionate about really churning, not churning, that's a bad term, really producing really high quality CPs, right? Because you guys will serve your community, you'll serve the country. You know, we were trying to sort of meet the needs of the nation. So to do that, we need to produce really high quality, qualified, experienced CP. And to achieve those dreams, okay, and those big ambitious plans, we need resources. And the fundamental resource is the teaching faculty, basically, as well as obviously the clinical supervisors, be it internal in the university or externally at centers and hospitals and clinics and so on and so forth. So I think that's across the board. That is our biggest challenge. So IMU, we're always looking for people, okay? Unfortunately, the pool is not there. The interest is not there. And that's something that I guess we have to think about lah. Like how come, you're out there to help people, great, you want to practice, of course. But like Dr. Joel said just now, right? It's a lot about flexibility. It's a lot about being mobile. It's a lot about, just trying different things and probably later settling into one particular role or a couple of roles that you're really comfortable with. So at the beginning of your career, it's good to try and see. Don't rule anything out just yet, right? So the biggest challenge for us is similarly with Shabira and I guess other universities is the lack of resource.
Can I just say one quick word? One thing that's really helped me in my career so far is this saying that I use myself. Please use responsibly. And the saying is this: I will always say yes to opportunities at least once in my life, because I never know what's gonna work out. I never know whether it's gonna be jadi ke tak. So I try and see lah. If it's a good experience, great, I'll do it more. If it's not, then okay, I will never do it again, right? Just make good choices lah. Not all responsibility, not all opportunities you should try, but most you can try and see.
Oh, can I just add on to what Joel said? Sorry, it just triggered something. 2018 was the year of my yes. Year of yes for me. So I read this Shonda Rhimes book, whatever lah. Shonda Rhimes is still some, okay, never mind. So I read her book and she had a year where she said yes to everything. So in 2018, I said yes to everything that came my way. And that yes basically led me to join the starting team at Naluri, of which I'm still actively involved in. That yes, got me the opportunity financially also to do my PhD. So that year of yes really pushed me pushed me out of my comfort zone totally. But yeah, so maybe not a whole year, but some of the things I did, I don't want to do again. But yes, to echo what Joel said, you won't know until you try. Yeah.
Thank you to our panelists for sharing your challenges. I hear a lot of balancing going on, a lot of multitasking. There are definitely a lack of human resources in academia, in government. Our next question is actually more directed towards Dr. Joel Low, and we've been receiving quite a few of this question, is what is the business climate like to set up your own private center? And is it hard to sustain the business?
Statistically speaking, the answer should be no, it's not that hard, just because there's so few of us. Like, on MSCP, for example, we have what, 400-ish registered members, and out of that 400, I'm pretty sure maybe about 2/3, 3/4 of us are practicing, the others are not for whatever reason, right? So theoretically speaking, it shouldn't be a problem now. But I think the issue here is that a lot of the private centers are centered around Klang Valley, Penang, now Johor a little bit more. So that means that although the ratio of practitioners and centers to the Malaysian population isn't the greatest, geographically speaking, locality speaking, it's not good, right? Because a lot of centers are very clustered together, right? For example, where I am in PJ, right? I think I can count about half a dozen centers within 20 km of me. So it's actually quite competitive in that sense, right? So that's the issue to consider. Then I think someone in the chat also mentioned, is it hard for us to set up a center outside of the Klang Valley in another state? Again, theoretically, that should make sense, right? Because if all the centers are congregated in KL, for example, moving out of KL, out of the Klang Valley would make a lot of sense. But then the other factors considered also is the awareness, right? I think there is a reason why centers congregate around Klang Valley, Penang, JB, the major cities, right? Because, and no offense to any other states out there, right? But I think it's because they are the major centers. They're also a lot more aware and more psych educated, basically, right? Meaning they know more about psychology, they know more mental health. So there's a greater demand as well, right? Once you branch out to other states, that diminishes somewhat, right? I'm not saying there's no demand. Of course, there's going to be demand, but it's a different kind of demand, right? So then there's something to consider as well. So it's a chicken and egg kind of thing, right? You cannot open a center until there's a greater demand, but there won't be a demand until there's actually a center there, right? And nowadays as well, because we are quite comfortable and happy to use web platforms like this, for example, Google Meets or whatever, the Zoom and all that, that again dilutes that need to first have a physical presence in other states, for example, and things like that, right? So those are some considerations to be had, right? To be fair though, I think nowadays it's a lot easier to set up your own center, right? When I first started applying 10 years ago or so ago, the only option was for you to open up a traditional brick and mortar clinic, right? So that means an office, convert into clinic rooms and things like that. Nowadays, you don't really need that, right? I mean, you have a platform like Teams or Zoom, you're good to go, number one. Number two, a lot of co-working spaces out there offering rooms, dedicated rooms for therapy. There's also, I think, a dedicated therapy co-working space as well that you guys can Google and find out and see. So that means the barrier to entry to start a center or start a business is actually not that great anymore. It's quite much easier in that sense, right? So I don't think the problem or the issue here is whether or not to start your own business, whether that's feasible or not. I think a better or more crucial question is this: are you ready to start a center or not? Because I think a lot of clinical programs, and I'm sure Dalina Shavira will say the same thing as well. A lot of programs train you to be a very competent therapist. No program out there teaches you how to be a business person, right? So don't forget that when you start your own center, you are not only a clinician, you are a clinician and a business person together at the same time. Not everyone can do that. I know a lot of clinicians who, when you ask them to look at accounts, they just curl up in the ball and start crying in the corner. I'm one of them, right? I'm lucky because my business partner is a business guy, numbers guy, right? So I get to focus primarily on the clinical stuff. He focuses on the numbers, which I love him to bits for, right? I tell everybody that I see, if not for him, the mine were closing 10 years ago, right? The day we opened. So that's the thing to realize, to remind yourself as well. It might sound appealing to start your own center, but ask yourself, like, are you ready to start your own center or not, right? And do you want the stresses of starting your own center or not? Because if you really want to just be a clinician, starting a center is probably not what you want to do.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Joel. We shall move on to the third question. So this is directed to all panelists. Are there opportunities for international CPs in Malaysia? What about Malaysian CP who would like to work outside of Malaysia? I think Ms. Shabira mentioned working in Singapore. Maybe Ms. Shabira can start off answering this question.
Okay, in terms of opportunity of working outside Malaysia.
That and also opportunities for international CPs in Malaysia.
Okay, so first of all, for the opportunity outside Malaysia, from what I know, so I graduated from Health University. So some of my classmates are serving in Singapore. Okay, so from what I know there, in private and government settings, okay, clinical psychology in Singapore might be more developed, okay, than Malaysia. They have more awareness, and in terms of people coming there, is more, I would say, concentrated there, right? So these are options that you can go with. In fact, actually, to spill up, some of the companies actually directly to us, asking about UKM graduates, okay, offering UKM graduates job security there. So if it's something that you would like to go for, and in terms of salary, it is generally actually like quite similar as us, but due to currency, so it is much more, right? But of course, janganlah everyone go to Singapore, right? Like, who wants to serve our people? So if you want to find experience and all, then yes. But in terms of longer contribution, if you can contribute back to our community, that would be better, in my perception. Okay, for international CP, I know like a few of international CP working in Malaysia, right? There's no issue of that. They do the part-time teaching, part-time clinical practice. Some also have their own private center. But this one, I'm not sure. Actually, I researched about it, but I couldn't find the answer. Maybe Dr. Joy and Dalina can help me. In terms of, now we have to register with the MAHPC Act, right? The Malaysian Allied Health Practitioners Act. So for Malaysian, of course, it's a direct thing. But for international, I can't find information whether they can register, they need to register. Yeah, maybe someone else can help me with that.
All right. Would Dr. Darlina want to handle this? No? Okay. What about Dr. Joel?
Yeah, I think, Joel, you're involved, right, in the discussions?
Yep. So I think for now, nothing yet, because I think now the focus is still trying to get the local practitioners on board, right? But eventually, I think international, or at least clinicians who are coming from overseas, they can practice. It's just that they have a few more requirements they need to fulfill, right? One of them is the idea that if you are coming to practice in Malaysia, you need to be doing something that is above and beyond what any other clinician can do in Malaysia. So that means you're expertise in something, or you're a specialist in something, for example, that we don't have access to here in Malaysia locally, then that will give you easier access, right? That's the first thing. Second thing, I think, is also the time factor as well. Eventually, when we talk about licensing, the expectation is that we will have to renew our license every 2 years, if I'm not mistaken, or 3 years, 2 or 3 years, I can't remember. But for international practitioners, it'll be 1 year. So it's a lot more restrictive in that sense. And the whole idea here is to try and nurture local talent first and foremost before we bring in expats in that sense. For now, it's not an issue. For now, because they still haven't gotten to that realm yet, international practitioners still can come in, no issues. The only limiting factor is your work permit. So you need to be able to have someone sponsor your work permit. If you can get that, then you should be good to go. Not an issue, right? But make sure you just check and see for any updates, which I don't think there is anything out there yet, but eventually there will be. Right? I just want to add one small thing to what Shabira said about practicing internationally. Very cool prospect for you guys to look out for. This is pre-COVID. We were actually approached by this resort chain in the Maldives, and because they had a lot of expat staff and also a lot of expat tourists there, right? They wanted to do this whole medical tourism kind of thing. So they wanted to hire someone from Malaysia and be an on-site clinical psychologist in their resort chains. And you see, do therapy with the clients there. And then I asked them, so what I do in my off time? Oh, you get to enjoy the resort. So I'm like, oh my God, if this was like 10 years ago, I had no kids and not married yet, it should be quite fun to do. There are a lot of opportunities outside. I think Middle East is hiring. Singapore, of course. Just keep an eye out. There are opportunities out there.
Thank you. Shall we move on to the next question, which is related to this? Someone has asked, I'm slowly getting frustrated over being dismissed from job opportunities because of my lack of experience in years. And what kind of opportunities can I consider to widen my experience with financial limitations while seeking a job? Any relevant advice or recommendations? Shall we have Ms. Shabira answer this first?
Okay. In terms of that, in my opinion, you might try practicing in NGO, because in NGO, they usually do need resources. I mean, the therapies. But bear in mind, for NGO, there will be lower rate for you, right? So in the private sector, we have a standardization, and usually we have a portion, 60% go to therapies and 40% go to center, for example. But in NGO wise, the rate is much lower. But if you want to find experience, I think this is going to be a good platform. Although, Shelby, when you graduated, you did exposed to the practicum and all, right? Another one is, of course, perhaps joining any community service or community screening, widen your network, polish your skills, okay? And perhaps learn more, okay? So perhaps learn how to manage things. Yeah, I think that's what I can think of for now. Maybe other panel want to guide more.
Thank you, Ms. Shabira. Would Dr. Darlina have something to add to this as you watch students graduate and all?
No, I'm just wondering, I can appreciate if that's the challenge with trying to find full-time employment. Full-time employment as a CP, I think that's more challenging than finding associate positions. Because from my experience is, the centers that I do know, they're very happy to take in associates because it's beneficial for the center as well. Because, it's good for a center to have, a good number of associates. Joel, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the centers I work with, they're happy to have associates because, to meet the demands of their clients, especially centers that do a lot of EAPs. Those who do employee assistance program, they have, agreements with whichever companies, corporate sectors and things like that. There's always activities. If it's not seeing clients, it's running workshops, giving webinars and whatnot. And we're, at least the centers I'm at, we're always like scrambling for people to run the webinars or run the workshops, or even see clients, right? So I again, I might be wrong. This is just based on my limited knowledge of the centers that I know, or friends that are, the other CPs as well. I feel like if it's associates, it's much easier compared to full-time position, only because full-time position is just very limited. Yeah.
Would Dr. Joel like to add to what Dr. Darlina has said?
No, I think they've mentioned pretty much what I want to say as well. I think maybe just one quick thing to add is also that in most cases, if you are a full-time employed clinician in whatever organization you're in, right, the expectation a lot of times is that you do several roles. It's not just that one thing, right? Admin, for example, crisis cases, on calls, and things like that. So that's also something to factor in as well. But by and large, I think Dr. Dina and Shabira have mentioned most of what I wanted to say as well.
Thank you very much. Let us move on to the next question. Are the specialized job scopes more beneficial, for example? So only targeting neurodevelopmental disorders, or like, is it important to eventually develop a niche in this profession, or is being a jack of all trades valued or encouraged? So I think the question is whether or not they should go into a certain pathway, or should they, widen their experience, so to say. I see thinking faces. Okay, Dr. Joel, would you like to answer this question first?
I think there's benefit to both. I think at the end of the day, it really depends on what your passions are. Maybe I'm being a bit naive and simplistic about when I say this, but I think your specialty finds you. I think when you do work in a career for long enough, you're naturally drawn towards things that inspire you. You're naturally drawn towards things that need you. And eventually that's where you end up and you become a specialist in that regard. Obviously with extra training and all that kind of stuff, you don't just go in just because I'm passionate and then but you get trained as well. But I think that experience with a wide variety of things lets you then decide what are the aspects that you like and don't like, right? Like for me, for example, I do only CBT. My main modality is CBT and nothing else, right? And it was something that fell on my lap because my supervisor was a hardcore CBT practitioner, and therefore I was trained that way as well. But I found that it was something that made sense to me. It was something that I could apply to all my clients, and it worked, right? So it's a very gradual thing. I didn't wake up one day and say, okay, I'm going to do CBT. No, it's not that. It's something that that occurred to me, right? And then I did it. I liked it, and then I went for it. But to be fair, though, I don't at this point of our national development for CPs, because we are so limited. The opportunity to specialize also is quite limited as well. Like if you are Shabira, for example, and what she said just now, if you have one CP in one hospital in, let's say, in Kuantan, let's say, right, and if let's say you are a child specialist, like for example, right, what happens to everyone else? You can't ignore them, right? So I think sometimes the current state of development also limits that ability to specialize. Almost, I wouldn't say totally, but it influences that ability to specialize, right? Because if you have more generalists, for example, then you can cover a wider variety of population. And I think that's why places like the UK, America, Australia, there are so many CPs out there, so many practitioners out there, then the opportunity and the luxury to specialize is a lot more accessible. It's there, and that's why people do so. So I'm also thinking from that level as well. As a country, maybe we are not ready yet for that, but I could be wrong. Just maybe just stick with me the thing that we are.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Joel. So what I'm hearing is, along the path of exploration, somehow you would find a path where you are more likely inclined towards. There's also the environment and how it shapes you. Dr. Darlina, would you like to add to this question?
Yeah, I think it depends. I think I agree with Joel in the sense that CP is still so young and we're so limited in numbers that, we need somebody that can basically see all types of clients. But when you say specialization, I'm thinking along the lines of, like, if you're thinking about neuropsych, right, neuropsychologist, there's one part where you're the practitioner, but there's also another part where you're the researcher. right? If you want to go and do more research, or you're very interested in neuropsych, or more cognition side of things, cognitive side kind of things and things like that, then the research part, I think in Malaysia, there's a lot of opportunities in that sense. Again, of course, being a bit biased, it is in a university setting. So, we practitioners, we only see CP, right? You hear counseling psychologists, and you hear bits and pieces of health psychology here and there in the country. But actually, like education psychologists, social psych, cognitive psychologists, IOs, there's plenty of them actually practicing as well. It's just they're, I guess, in terms of numbers, CP, it still sort of outnumbers those different groups lah. Okay, so there is also that part where you can go into research and focus onto these more specific areas if that's where your interest lies.
All right, thank you, Dr. Darlina. What about Ms. Shabira?
Okay, so I think basic generally we should be able to be competent in all kind of cases, right? Be it a children, adult, care assessment, intervention. But eventually, as I progress in my career, only 5 years for now, right? I think it's also important for you to find your expertise area. So, in your early career, you can continuously practice what you did in practicum, where you just did all. You can't really choose your cases, right? But eventually, you can plan ahead. What is the niche that you want to venture? So, if that is the niche, what is your plan? Perhaps working in this kind of center related with that part of client, so you will be more experienced in that setting. So if you're planning to do a PhD, maybe sponsored or what, then you can opt for a government path perhaps. Why is important? Because nowadays, yes, of course, in terms of progression or finding expertise, it's kind of limited in Malaysia, right? Like Dr. Joel has said just now. But eventually, if you get to go through it, now we are going towards kepakaran. So what is your subspecialty? So everyone can be a CP, but what is your further specialty? So for example, Dr. Joel, okay, is a CBT expert. Okay, also same as my supervisor, Prof. Fidaus, right? CBT hardcore. So CBT expert. Okay, giving example for Prof. Fidaus, she's a CBT expert in Asia, Southeast Asia. So if you say her name, or anyone know her, so she's really good in it, and she spent a lot of time in terms of academic supervision and research in CBT. So she's an expert in it. So if you like perhaps a children cases, or what kind of subspecialty that you like, okay, maybe trauma related, or like Dr. Darlina has said, cognitive and neuropsychology, we do have opportunities in terms of research, right? And of course, if in my clinic, we do have a wide range of neuropsychology assessments as well. Okay, so some cases referred now to do this pre-assessment, before operation, okay, post assessment and all. So yeah, I think that is my 2 cents.
Thank you, Ms. Shabira. So I'm hearing that it's starting to, for the field in general, you can go and explore areas which you're interested in, whether or not it's academia and research, or even modality specializing. So in general, it's really up for you to explore. Let us move on to the next question. Okay, so this is where we'd like to direct it to Dr. Darlina first. When is the best year to be a supervisor? If 5 years of practice but with minimal clients, is it still okay to be a supervisor?
Okay, so to be clinical supervisor, as per sort of proposed by the MQA program standards, it's 4 years, 4 years clinical experience, right? So if you have 4 years, and I think for a certain, it'd be good also if you've undergone a sort of clinical supervision training, a formal training. So that's being offered. Different institutions might offer that yearly or something like that. So if you've had 4 years clinical experience, and like for IMU, again, right, we have big dreams, big goals, big plans. So our supervisors they should have undergone formal clinical training, clinical supervision training. Then the only way to further enhance that skill is to be a supervisor. So get the years, get the training, and then get the experience of supervising. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Darlina. So in summary, it's 4 years and practice, right? So due to time, I would like to move on to a next exciting question for early career psychologists. I've noticed that the pay for clinical psychologists in Malaysia tends to be relatively low. Could you explain the factors contributing to this, and if there are any steps being taken to improve it? How do we ensure there's standardization in salary for junior clinical psychologists, especially at entry level? Let's direct this to Dr. Joel first.
How do I answer this question without shooting myself in the foot? I have a feeling, right? This is not born in any research or fact or anything like that, right? But I think the reason why it's low is because for the better part of the past 2 decades or so, right? Nobody really knows what we do, right? It's such a cowboy profession in that sense, right? And I think now with the ACTA, now with GPA opening up more spots for us, more government hospitals opening up more positions and things like this, it acts as a reference point, right? I think then we can use that as a barometer or a yardstick in which to compare what is a feasible rate. I'm not saying that the government is paying fairly or anything like that. I'm not saying that at all, but it gives you something to compare against, right? And I think what will happen as the profession matures, people will start to recognize our abilities, our resources, what we can do, and then a pay commiserate to that would be then will come, right? I think that's the main thing to remember. Second thing is this, right? Like it or not, clinical psychology is a profession like any medical-based profession, whether it's dentistry, whether it's being a vet, being a doctor, or whatever it is, right? Experience matters, right? So I get it that some people have said that, yeah, but I've got my master's, I've got advanced training and my postgraduate training, I should be getting paid a certain amount. And yes, I do agree with that, right? But we also have to remember that, like it or not, experience plays a really big part in terms of what we do, right? And I'm not saying that it's the be all and end all, no, right? Because obviously there are people who are a lot more talented, a lot more intuitive, and all that kind of good stuff, who are able to do things that maybe even older people can't do, and I get that, right? But like it or not, generally speaking, by and large, experience matters, right? So that's also something that we need to keep in mind as well, that even though at the start it's low, no, I won't say lower, it's just low, it's just actually not even low, it's okay, it's not too bad. Maybe Shabira can give us a bit of an insight into what the government pays entry-level practitioners nowadays. I'm still not too familiar, right? It's okay, right? I think it's something to start off with, right? And as we grow, as we get more experience, as we specialize, kepakaran and things like that, like what Shabira was saying just now, that will then change, right? And also don't forget that because of a lot of private practitioners in Malaysia's the way they practice, the way they get their jobs is by associate positions, like what Dalina was saying just now, right? That also means that it's really dictated by you, right? Because if you see one client a day for a week, you're going to get paid 5 hours of work, and then that's something that you decide upon, right? It's really up to you how you're going to dictate your schedule, right? So I think there's just so many factors involved, and for us to blanket statement say that all early career clinical psychologists get paid very little is not entirely it's not a fair general statement, right? Because I think there's a big range to be had here, right? Because I can just imagine if, let's say, you join a university and you join their clinical department, for example, your pay is not going to be very, very low. I think it will be representative, or at least in recognition of your postgraduate degree and things like that. It's going to be okay. But if every university has two positions, it is what it is, lah. You cannot challenge or you cannot change market demand like that, right? Now, the last thing I want to say is this, like, as an employer myself, right? It's something that we recognize as an issue because we want to hire good people, of course, right? But at the same time, we also need to balance that out with economic demands as well, right? If I could offer, let's say, $10,000 a month to the best clinician possible so that I can have them in my team, would I want to do that? Of course. But if I'm getting $5,000 worth of clients, where is the extra 5,000 come from, right? So it's also a time issue as well, right? I wouldn't guarantee, but I'm very confident in saying that what we earned 10 years ago compared to now is significantly different, right? I feel it myself as well, right? So that's something to consider as well. As the demand grows, our supply, of course, is finite in that sense, but that will also then dictate and change the way we are able to charge, the money we're able to command and things like that. Recognition is another thing, education is another thing, experience is another thing, right? So I would encourage all young practitioners out there. It's frustrating at first. Trust me, I was there, right? The first few months after graduation, I was seeing like 2 clients a week. I'm like, please God help me, right? But as time grows on, as you get more experience, as you get a mass of clients, right? A momentum of clients, it gets a lot more comfortable. It gets a lot better, right? So it's something that we have to hang in there, right? It will get better, I promise. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Joel. So in relation to the question, we would like to ask both Ms. Shabira and Dr. Joel, is there a difference between the salary range for private centers, EAP, academia, government, and Dr. Darlina? If you have things to add, feel free. Let's go with Ms. Shabira first.
Okay. For government sector, there is a standard rate of the salary entry. Okay, so it ranges from about 3,000 minimum to 10,000 maximum, right? So, but the increment is consistent and I would say fair. So I think like Dr. Joey said, perhaps when you start, it might be a bit of a struggle, but as you go on, yeah, it's actually progress. And other than that, when we are looking for a job, right? I think it's not only about the salary. So other important parts is about the benefits, okay, the job security and stability, which government can offer. Okay. I mean, for example, although the government salary might be a bit lower than the others, but the increment is consistent and fair. And in addition, we have a pension, right? And of course, we have access to, how to say, like government hospitals and all. Okay. And for UCAM is even more advantageous, I believe, because we have our own hospital. So in terms of our medical care, we will go to HUKM or the new hospital, Hospital Pakar Kanak-Kanak, okay, the first child specialist hospital in in Malaysia. So in terms of that, so dia ada timbang tara lah, which one that you get. Here it might be extra, here might be lesser. So it depends on what you want. Yep. So I'm not sure about the private range. Maybe Dr. Joel can share. I don't know.
Dr. Joel?
Like I said just now, because a lot of the team members are working as associates, then the range varies, So if you're up for taking on more clients, then naturally your pay would go up, This is not my own center, but MSCP has done a survey. I think the range of an average salary range was anywhere between 2 to 7,000, if I'm not mistaken, or 8,000, something like that. So, but again, that's very highly dependent on the number of clients that you get, right? So, and it's also a factor balance between not only how many clients that you are willing to take on, but also how many clients are available, in that sense, right? So that's why a lot of associates, like what Dalina was saying just now, would tend to ally themselves to multiple centers just to get their numbers up, for example, and things like that. So it's really one of those things where you get what you put in, right? Just adding to what Shabira was saying about the different kind of resources. Don't forget that time is also a big factor as well. One very underrated factor or resource that us clinical psychologists have, especially in the private sector who works on an associate basis, is time, right? Like me, for example, I was very blessed to have been able to go for, attend my kids' graduation, sports team. You know how kids nowadays have a million different things, right? And my flexibility in terms of being able to have my own time when I see my clients, or I free up a day, for example, is actually very, very valuable. Yes, I don't have that much money, maybe, but in terms of the kind of experiences I get to have my kids, I love that, So that's something to consider as well, I think.
Okay, thank you to both Ms. Shabir and Dr. Joel. There are a lot of factors to consider. There's the benefits, there's the time, and in the end, there's the salary range. So due to time, we need to move on to the 10th question, which we would like to direct to Dr. Dalina. What would be some of the qualities that the interviewer is looking for when the candidate is applying for a master's in clinical psychology program?
Many factors. Let me see if how much I can list, how many I can list here. Okay, one, of course, your qualifications, right, that you need, because we're driven by MQA requirements. Students who want to join MCP programs, there's specific requirements. So for any universities that you want to apply to, they should publish that already, right? So what's your minimum CGPA, English requirements, if any, and all those things. So you go to the respective websites and see what are those sort of academic requirements. Now, the other parts that we want to look at is actually your motivation to be a CP and your understanding of the role of a CP. So we've interviewed many candidates, and while many know what CP is all about, quite a few don't. They just know CP by name, but they don't know what's involved in the role of a CP. So make sure you know that. And a big advantage is if you have worked in a relevant field, okay, or you've been exposed or you shadowed a CP, or you've worked in a clinic where there is a CP. So you see for yourself what a CP does day in, day out, and things like that. And why that's important is because you're going to invest 2 years of your life doing something super specific. And upon graduation, that's your job, right? So if you don't know what you're getting yourself into, why are you getting yourself into that, right? So we're assessing that, your understanding and also your motivation of wanting to do CP. Other things that we look at is, I think most CP programs also have research components in there. So we want to know your experience with research. That again would be an advantage. And just, I guess, your other stuff, other more subjective stuff, I guess, like, your insight, things like self-care, how do you cope with difficult situations and things like that. So that's more sort of on the personality side of you, but generally that's what we're looking at, the motivation part and the experience part. I think we can see the difference when we're interviewing candidates if they've experienced working or done some internship or even shadowing CPs, observing CPs in their job, doing assessments and intervention like that. You speak to that, we can already see that you get what you're getting yourself into. Okay, so it's a way of making sure that you know what you're getting yourself into, because it's 2 years of your life. We all here who RCPs, you know how difficult those 2 years are. And we want you to be able to be motivated throughout the 2 years and graduate. Yeah.
Thank you, Darlena. So in summary, it's really about your motivation, why you want to be a CP, and having the qualities for it. Okay, let's move on to question number 11. We will have 2 more questions, 3 more after this. I know it's 9:30, but if you'd like to join us, please stay on as we answer 3 more questions. So for question number 11, we would like to direct it to Ms. Shavira. Are there any possible certificates I can take to be able to become interventionist or to conduct screening with my psychology degree?
With my limited knowledge and experience, for this, I'm not so sure about the certification, but one that I can think of is about ABA, right? Applied Behavior Analysis, where ABA they do have a certified training. So if you would like to be a ABA certified therapist, then you can join this kind of course, okay, in terms of intervention using ABA. Other than that, maybe it's my limited knowledge. Perhaps if other panels want to share as well.
Would Dr. Darlena or Dr. Joel have anything to add on to this?
Unless I'm mistaken, in Singapore, right? At least I had a few conversations with some CPs in Singapore, right? They mentioned that similar to us, that they don't have enough CPs, right? So what they have done is that they've gotten Bachelor of Psychology graduates, excuse me, to be trained as technicians, assessment technicians, right? So like, for example, with ways and for example and things like that, right? While they may not be able to do the interpretation or the report itself, they are able to run the assessment. They can conduct the assessments, right? TOVA, things like that, right? So they are technicians in the sense that they run the test itself, but analysis and as the report will be then given to the ClinPsych to take over from there, right? So I think that one is possible. Excuse me. Other than that, I'm not too sure. I think